Welcome to a Girl in the Product World podcast, dedicated to hearing the stories of the amazing people working in product across so many different industries. People who are building world-class products. People who inspire me. So join me on this podcast, A Girl in the Product World, inspiring me, inspiring you. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of A Girl in the Product World. I'm your host Amna and I'm joined by a very esteemed guest who is fabulous and I'm so excited he's here. So I'm here today with Alastair. Now Alastair is a CPO and advisor and he has worked for many well-known brands including Lloyds and Tesco's as well as startups and scale-ups. He specializes in understanding people, which is very important in product, hence the variety of product roles that he's had over the last 2 decades. He also holds a degree in managerial and administrative studies from Aston University. He's really done it all, which is why he's joining me today. Alastair, welcome.
Oh, thanks very much. Great to be here. I don't know if I can live up to that intro, but yeah, I will do my best.
I'm sure you will, and I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation. So let's get straight into it. Alastair, could you please share your journey thus far in your career?
Okay, so as you just alluded to, it's quite broad. It's quite squiggly career, I often say. So I am a CPO and advisor, whatever that is. But I've worked across B2B and B2C, strategy consulting, corporate, startups, scale-ups. Co-founded a business. And so let me unpack that a little bit. And then I can tell a nice story. It wasn't quite as linear and planned as this, but I will tell you the story. So I started life as a strategy consultant because when I left university, having done a business degree, I didn't really know what to do, and I thought this would give me a good broad experience to see how other companies did things. And back in the day, back then, the path into startups was definitely less. It wasn't a well-known path. Certainly I didn't know anyone that went that way at university. So I worked mostly in telecoms and high tech, and I did loads of financial modeling and business cases and built a core set of strategy consulting skills around presentation and structured communication and all the things that a consultant does. And actually, that's been a real foundation for a lot of my work thereafter. Some highlights: I spent a project in Korea working for Samsung doing business to business printer strategy. So they did printers in their sort of consumer world, and we were helping them define this B2B printer strategy. And it was fascinating. And the real sort of thing that stuck with me was actually the insight there was the SME that they were going for, the SME market, the kind of mid-market, was much more like a consumer than it was a mass enterprise piece. And so, again, later on in life, I've worked in the SME world, and that rang true again. After about 6 or 7 years, I realised I didn't want to be a career consultant, or at least I thought I wanted to own a bit of the business and see things through a bit longer term. And so I met a really smart person who convinced me to go and work for Lloyds Bank. So I switched sector, went to Lloyds Bank, and ultimately spent 7 years there as well. I owned different parts of the current account and credit card business for them. Finished doing 3 years owning the overdrafts business. It's like 500 million P&L and 12 million customers, which sounds hilarious. I was in my 20s, and it's definitely the biggest number of business or customers I've run, ever since. And I was there responsible for when we changed from punitive overdraft fees to planned overdraft fees, and we put sort of customer centric things in, like sending text messages instead of letters to customers to tell them they're going overdrawn, which I find hilarious now. It's just, the business was set up to make money. You went overdrawn and you got charged a punitive fee, and we sent you a letter telling you to. We automatically had 2 days, grace before the post arrived for us to earn some income. It's absolutely crazy. But we started to be more customer centric, and that kind of flicked a light bulb on, and also I learnt the importance of listening to customers and the power that customers had. That was driven by having my name go out on all the communications every week to 12 million customers. And I got phone calls on the weekend. I got all sorts of stuff, on my mobile phone. you suddenly realize how your work impacts on people if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So excuse me. From there, that customer thing was what I started. I had this idea I might enjoy speaking to customers and finding out a bit more about what what needs they're trying to solve. And this was I guess as sort of the lean startup and modern day product management was becoming a bit more commonplace. And the next path took me much more customer centric business. I went to Tesco, and Tesco is a big old beast, but it's very agile and a great place. So it's been about 4 years there. Amazing people I work for, some of the best people I've ever worked for at Tesco, and I overhauled the fruit and veg proposition for Tesco, which might sound very odd, but it's the number one determinant of store choice. Actually, people go to stores because of fruit and veg. I did the club card strategy. I launched a new discounted channel to compete against Aldi and Lidl. I did the pre-work before it was launched, and then I ran the home delivery and click and collect product, including the Delivery Saver subscription product. And the thing that resonated the most at that time from Tesco, this has stuck with me ever since, the importance of qual research, the importance of speaking to your customers. So on that produce, the fruit and veg project, we found that why customers weren't coming to Tesco for fruit and veg was because the freshness perception was declining. And so you immediately think, well, let's just make the fruit and veg better, let's make it high quality. And actually we did taste tests, and Tesco was coming out on top. So it wasn't the intrinsic quality. And I was in the home of a customer, chatting to the customer, and I was talking to them about the 3 peppers that were in their fridge going off. And it turned out that we had only got them because of a buy one get one free deal. We did loads of buy one get one free deals. They didn't really need 6 peppers; they only needed 3 peppers. And what they remembered was the 3 going off in the fridge at the end of the week. And so made me realise, you only really truly understand the impact. Quantitative data will tell you what's going on, where the problem is, rather, and qualitative will tell you what's going on, why, and what you can do about it. And that, again, really resonated with me, and taking it forward through all the product work I've done thereafter. So that's 17 years, all of that in corporates, and reflecting. I was sort of banging my head against a wall a bit, trying to make corporates more agile and more nimble and more like a startup. And had the opportunity to take voluntary redundancy, and thought, well, if I don't try my hand at a startup world now, and I'm given this chance, when am I going to do that? And so for the last 6 or 7 years, I've done that. I've been CPO for a consumer mortgage fintech, an SME marketplace, an SME lender, and then most recently in a couple of Web3 protocols. And we could spend an entire podcast talking about the amazing world of crypto and Web3, but I will save that for another day. I have got a lot of stories from working in startups. If everyone's not worked in a startup, all the cliches are true. But some of the interesting things, we had to fire our chief risk officer because he turned out to be a convicted fraudster at one company.
Oh my god.
I had to, with 3 other people, redefine the business strategy, the structure of the business, the go-to-market strategy for a business in a weekend, because the board had fired the CEO, the founder, and the MD on the Friday.
Wow.
Kind of challenging. And then even when it goes really well, so we grew a business something like 23% month on month for a year straight, the 10 million a month lending business, 200 customers served, only for it to get shut down because our owner was sanctioned when Russia invaded Ukraine, which is not on my bingo card at the time, shall we say. So lots of crazy stuff, lots of great stories, but loads of fun. And at the heart of it all was trying to be customer centric and building product teams at different stages of business. And it's very different what you can do in a B2B business versus a B2C business, and a business where there's 5 people versus 500 people, and trying to put the right processes and principles and frameworks and all that stuff in place at each. And sometimes you want none of that. Sometimes you're reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. Well,
I hope that gives a bit of a flavour.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say we do need a part 2. There is a lot, and this is exactly why I wanted Alastair on, because he's done incredible things, as you've just heard in just his intro. but he's incredibly humble about it. And I was like, no, I need to tease it out of Alastair and share it with the audience, because this is exactly why I have these conversations on this podcast. And wow, there is so much to unpack there, from the fact that you went into the startup world after kind of 17 years. I feel like a lot of people feel pressured to do that very early on in their career, but you know, you've clearly got so much experience behind you, and you've done it, and you've made a success of it, wherever possible, which obviously was outside of your remit. But there's also so much in there about, you know, the kind of data you've collected over time, and just also the different types of industries that you've gone to as well. I speak to a lot of product people now who are very new in the game. You know, they're coming straight from university, which is an alien concept for me, because, you know, I think a lot of us got into product by accident. And they're very stressed about, you know, what industry to go into. But I think the truth is, from my perspective, try and go to as many industries as you want, right? And because it's good to get that well-roundedness, and product is done so different in so many different places as well, and that's what I've loved about it. And I think that's, like I mentioned, it makes you very well-rounded, and I believe you're one of those people. And I want to know what product is all about to you, given that you've gone through, you know, such a journey, so many different industries, different types of and scales of industries. What is it all about to you?
Well, just picking up on that last point, before I dive into your question, like, yeah, I'm definitely a generalist, and I subscribe to the benefit of diverse teams and diverse experiences. That's something that I firmly believe in, and a lot of people I speak to feel the same way. It isn't always the case when you're applying for a job. You know, oftentimes they look for square pegs for square holes. You know, has this person done it 5 times already? You know, especially in the current market. But you know, I've done back in strategy consulting days, did a lot of work around team dynamics, and you try and build teams based on different skill sets, and a balance across the team. And part of that is, you know, building diversity of experience and ability. So you know, when I'm recruiting teams, I absolutely look to try and figure out where my gaps are, where the team's gaps are, and fill those. But to answer your question, how do I try to think about this, like, without being too philosophical? I mean, product ultimately, as you know, is like the intersection of customer, business, and technology, right? And so, you know, do customers want it? Will they pay for it and make us money? And can we build it? And so, like, I come from that customer angle, you know, building things to solve a genuine customer need, and I love getting under the skin of the customer and figuring out the real reason they're doing something. Like, you know, think about the peppers example before, on the produce that I gave before. But I guess sometimes product has really come under criticism, especially recently, for the lack of commercial appreciation or understanding. And because of my strategy roots, or just because I did a business degree, because just the way I am, I don't know. Like, I always try to instill into my teams, like, the absolute critical importance to understand the value drivers in a business, or the value levers. You know, what are the things you can pull that are going to create value for the business. And you know, if you can then get a clear line of sight from what we're building in the team through to how we deliver value for the business, and what metrics and OKRs maybe, or objectives we're achieving, I think that's critical. It allows you to, you know, focus on the biggest assumptions. If your assumption is this, you know, this has to be true for this lever to move for us to make money, well, then you can test that assumption really quickly. And so, you know, I guess going back in summary, it's like, of course I speak to customers, and infer, you know, from that what they are looking to build, but like really honing in on the assumption to figure out how do you deliver value.
I really want to go into that point a little bit more about value, because I feel like you just said there is a lot of criticism from the commercial side of things as well. Now, you gave a really nice example there with your time at Lloyds, where overdrafts, you almost kind of overhauled overdrafts. And I you know what, we don't really worry about overdrafts anymore, because there's so much control that's given to the customer now, whereas before, you're right, it literally was, you find out you've gone into your overdraft when you go to the bank and you speak to the teller, for example. Communication wasn't very great between the bank and the customer, and then, you know, before they know it, they're in debt and they're worrying about it. That's not really a problem anymore. But from the bank's perspective, that essentially they are losing money. And I think sometimes in product, we have to have that battle of something's right for the customer, but not necessarily right for the business, because it means the business may make a loss. And it's the same vice versa. How do you find you've balanced that in the past where it's worked, or is that something
Well,
that's just been a challenge and one side just has to accept this is the way it is?
so in that particular example, it's really fascinating because of the way the business was structured, and oftentimes you get this in larger corporates, there's more silos. It turned out that whilst we made something like 80% of revenue from unplanned fees and 20% from planned fees, something like 80% of losses came from unplanned fees. So the customers who were going into an unplanned overdraft weren't able to pay that back. And then we had to ultimately write that off. And we had teams, obviously managing collections and dealing with customers, and there's a huge cost associated with that. And so the business case actually washed its face, as it turned out, because although the revenue, the top line reduced, the ultimate profitability of the business was better. So it's not always as cut and dry as it first seems. And again, you identify that by looking at the drivers and being holistic and thinking about the impact right across the business. And but then in scenarios where it's like trickier, let's say, perhaps it's less cut and dry, you still got to create a case or an understanding as to what you're shooting for. So let's say it's Uber, when you used to be able to give £10, or I think it's £10, wasn't it, you used to get for referring a friend, right? And it's like, that is not a profitable in isolation. That is not a profitable exercise. You're immediately burning cash, giving it away. However, the assumption is that you're going to grow your customer base, and lifetime value of the customers that stick around and and continue to pay will be sufficient to build the profitability of the business. Now, I assume somebody went through that, built a business case, looked at it and said, these are numbers we have to hit. And on the way, you're kind of measuring, what success looks like. And they obviously had very deep pockets, because the hockey stick went a long way down before it starts to come back up again. It allowed them to scale super quick, and that was what they were shooting for. So I think you just need to be able to clearly articulate the hypotheses you are testing, and what value you're going to deliver to the business. Value could be customer satisfaction. It could be growth of new customers at a cost. It could be stuff that isn't going to deliver profitability in the short term. But at some point you got to have a path to profitability. Certainly in today's climate, right, where money is not as cheap as it once was. So I appreciate that's a little bit of a generic answer, but hopefully it gives some examples to illustrate the point.
No, I think I completely agree. I think profitability, yes, it's important, but it's not always something you will see in the short to medium term. And I think businesses certainly need to remember that. And product will always try and help you get to that stage through the various measures that we have. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Now I'm going to switch topics a little bit, because this is something that I'm very passionate about as well, and you have done a huge piece on this. So you recently had a blog post published by Recruited, who are amazing. Please do go check them out if you're listening, which was all about navigating the difficult product recruitment market right now. And it's a wonderful article with heaps and heaps of advice. Now, I would encourage people to go and read it, even if you're not looking to be recruited at the moment. I think it's just good to understand what's going on out there, and if you can help in any way. But Alastair, if there was one piece of advice to give candidates right now in the current climate, what would it be?
Don't give up. No, I mean, that's important, I suppose. I get in the article I covered from like the sort of philosophical to the practical, like how do you stay optimistic, where do you get your energy from, how to build your brand, how to optimize your effectiveness, and stuff like that, which I think are all important. If I'm going to pick one, I think I put this in the article. The market is really tough right now. In fact, it's the toughest I've seen it since in 24 years. And you could get really down about that. But at the same point, I've also seen tough markets, and I've seen them come around. So don't forget that. So focus. My point is focus. Focus on where you can make the biggest impact. Focus where you've got connection, you've got an in, or at least you've got someone who can get you an in. So how do you do that? You need to network, you need to build your brand, you need to get out to events. We caught up at an event last night. You need to, some people prefer LinkedIn, some people like IRL stuff, some people prefer community, and there's virtual communities, and there's great product meetups, product pints, product hang, whatever. There's a thousand. You'll be amazed if you can't Google them and find them. But let me give a real example of how this works. So I applied for a job last year sometime actually, and I got bumped straight away off the CV, right? And I was like, oh wow, that's a bit of a bummer. And I looked on LinkedIn at people who were connected to the business, and it turned out one of the designers that used to work for me had a connection who worked as a product manager at this business. I reached out to the designer and said, oh look. Actually, this was before I got bumped. So I was in the process. I sent the application. I was like, right, I need to get in. Spoke to the designer. At some point she introduced me to this person, and at some point between her introducing me and this person who contacted me, I got the decline. I still had the call. The first thing I said to the product person was, I've applied for a job and I've just got declined. But anyway, I just wanted to build my network, see how you're doing, and understand a bit more about the business. And and long story short, we had a great chat. She's great. And she spoke to HR, and she's like, oh, it's probably because of reason A, B, C, D. And lo and behold, a few days later, I got a message from HR saying, oh, do you fancy a chat? And I had a chat and explained my situation. And from there, went on and had some really good interviews. Didn't ultimately end up taking the job, but that's not really the point. It's to show that just how important and impactful a network can be. Now, part of me also reflects on that and gets a little bit depressed. It's like, oh, it's nepotism. It's only the people that you know. But at the same time, if I'm the hiring manager, or if you're the hiring manager, and sheer volume of applications today, in the hundreds, if not thousands, depending on. I'm a CPO, you get hundreds of CPO applications, which is bonkers. What are you going to do? How are you going to prioritize? You could throw darts at a dartboard, not very helpful, or you could look for recommendations, and you're going to go and speak to your network, and so it's just a practical way that humans work. And so instead of getting frustrated about that amount of work, go out there and build your network. And there's loads of cool ways you can do it. And I used to hate networking. The idea of it was just like, oh, this is so false, and what we do. Now I really enjoy it. I'm just going out to chat to people, chat products, talk about the market, and I say yes a lot. You asked me to come on a podcast, I said yes. Someone asked me to go do mentoring, I said yes. It just you never know what might come of it. And I'm not going into it to decide what might come of it, but it's more. I found that over time, just by sheer volume of interactions, something happens. And so that's my best advice. Don't be afraid. Go out there. There's loads of really interesting people that can often really enjoy giving you the benefit of their experience, and it might help you.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I completely echo the fact that something will happen, because you never know. And I've been in a similar position to you where I've applied and I've never seen a market like this. And I know my career has been, a lot shorter than yours, but it's tough. It's very difficult. However, just the sheer amount of conversations that I've had and the amount of people that I've met has been amazing. And it's led to so many things that I didn't actually plan for them leading to where they have led to. And it's cool. And there's something that I do want to pick up on that you said there is building your own brand. Now, I've spoken to loads of people and I say the same thing to them. And I think they get very overwhelmed with the fact that, oh, what does that mean? Do I need to become this sort of influencer? But it's not that, right? It can be as simple as posting one thing on LinkedIn every week, or just telling people what you do, and realizing yourself that, without even trying to build a brand, you are almost a brand without realizing it because of the career path that you might be on. So I just want to put it out there to people from your perspective. Like, how simple is it to put your brand out there? What's the minimum someone has to do to be able to say, yep, I am building my brand to, build my network or whatever it might be?
Do whatever feels comfortable to you. Like, like going back, you asked me one thing, I was going to keep reeling off things. Like, genuinely, don't get disheartened. Be optimistic. First of all, and take a break from staring at LinkedIn. Like, that's going to kill you. Like, everyone knows, like, staring at social media is not great for your mental health. And knowing that is a good place to start. But anyway, back on brand. Like, you've got to do something that feels natural to you. Like, I don't like doing video, so I don't typically do a lot of video stuff on LinkedIn or whatever. It might be a generational thing, I don't know. But I don't mind writing stuff. So I do end up writing a few posts here and there, and I got comfortable just being the reply guy sometimes. Kind of like you've got something to say, and fun. It's about figuring out what works for you. The simplest thing I think you can do is join a community, either a virtual one or one in real life, and just turn up and just talk to people. And if you just, by virtue of the fact you turn up at a number of events, you're going to get seen and noticed and see the same people, and probably build a connection and start to think a bit about, like, what interests you. You might meet somebody interesting who, well, last night I met a couple of great founders who are building a business to try and help old people, senior citizens, stop getting scammed by online scams. And I found that really interesting. I'm not going to do anything with it, but it's like, you meet interesting people, and you will find something that you connect with, and by virtue of that, you'll probably then get known, or you'll go off and read more about it or write something about it. It doesn't have to be contrived, I suppose, is my point. And so, that's the best advice. Do something that you like, and it's so cliched, but you don't need to force it.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much, Alastair. Now, I'm going to take a bit of a turn and go back to what I mentioned in your intro. You've worked for a few startups. Alastair, why do most fail?
Why do most fail? I mean, like, what are the stats? Something like 70 to 80% of businesses at pre-seed fail, and then 50% at Series A, 50% at Series B, 50% at Series C, 50% at Series D. So 95%, 95, whatever the maths is on that. So you're doomed to fail. Why bother? I think the reasons are many and varied. Would be the best summary. Like, might be lack of product market fit. It could be scaling too fast. It could be not scaling fast enough. It could be competitors coming in. It could be, like, a stack of different things. I think bottom line, most fail because they run out of money. They either haven't got the commercial, they've not hit profitability on a run rate basis or absolute basis, or they don't get the next round of funding that they needed to kind of keep them on the trajectory that they were on. And so that's all a bit like doom and gloom, and completely out of your control oftentimes. So, like, what's practical? Like, what I was would reflect on, like, what practical advice I can give, and I'd say, where teams, where I've seen it work from both sides, where we've cocked up, and we didn't do a good job, and then where we have done a good job. It's like, where people have context and alignment on what matters, and know where the priorities are, even if the priorities are wrong, but everyone's rowing in the right direction. That's when teams do really well, and that really impacts smaller businesses and startups. And conversely, when you have differences of opinion and people disagreeing on what the priorities are, you have infighting. The worst case, we had infighting in the management team and between the management team and the board, and it was a disaster. We had one function deploying something without telling another function, which then materially impacted all functions and the data that we had on the businesses, and it was a mess to clear up. And so, try and avoid. It's not, I mean, why would you deliberately not avoid that? Sorry, but it's easy to lose track. and it's management team's job to try and be aligned from the top and share across. But everyone in the organisation can help give context and help be vocal about what they're working on and why they're working on it. And just talking to people oftentimes will surface where you're not aligned and allow you to hopefully get aligned. And so like that's probably the most practical piece, and it doesn't happen consistently. It sounds obvious, but like objectives aren't always very well specced out or clearly defined in a way that you can measure and understand the levers that you're going to pull to deliver those objectives. And comes back to that commercial angle again, value levers. And but so anything you can do to try and be really to work towards that, or be vocal about that, or surface where there's a disagreement to help it get solved, will ultimately allow you to prioritize better and become more aligned.
Okay, got it. I mean, that's great advice, because I mean, I think investors have had probably a difficult year, and definitely founders with trying to collaborate with investors as well. So that is fabulous. And yeah, I think where you've got the alignment, things tend to work generally anyway, but definitely in a startup environment, that makes a lot of sense. And from my own experience, I can say, yeah, where there has been alignment, things work very, very well, surprisingly well sometimes, despite all the other things that go on around you. But where there's not, yeah, that tends to be where
I'm struggle to think of many organizations where it's as good as I hoped it to be. From Lloyds, Tesco, like big corporates still really struggle with this, because the bigger you are, the more complex it is. You're never going to draw a straight line between the person on the shop floor to the person in the boardroom, but you've got to try and try your best to align people behind clear objectives over a given period. And but you think it's easier at startups, but for some reason it's still tricky, and the best do it very well, I guess, and most don't, I would argue.
Yeah, I love it. Honestly, actually, I do want to ask, because this is a really interesting fact that I've read as well, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it, is when it comes to startups, I see a lot of young people try it, and I really applaud them because it's a really brave thing to do. However, with those stats of startups being successful or not, it's quite a well-known thing that people who are a bit more experienced and have matured, let's say, they tend to be a bit more successful with their startups as well. And I guess the age demographic, without being ageist, does that really make a difference? Have you seen that in your experience?
I don't know. I think I'm sure I've read somewhere that older founders have a bit more success. I don't know if that's true or not. Look, there are high pressure corporates, but typically startups are more frenetic, more chaotic, require you to do more, as in have a broader set of things, activities that you stand over, and oftentimes you have to manage and juggle uncertainty. If you don't know where your customers are coming from, and you're lurching from death's door to roaring success, it's stressful, and it takes a certain temperament, and you have to be able to you have to go into that with your eyes open. So it isn't for everyone, and where I'm going with this is isn't necessarily for everyone at every life stage. Let's say you are you've got young kids and you want to spend time with your kids. It might be more difficult if you're running and you're founding your own business at a given point. It might put pressures on your personal life, your family life, and your partner, because they will also feel the pressure, not just you. And so I don't know about an age thing, but it's like you need to be able to be comfortable with that. Now clearly, like as I said, you could go and work for an investment bank or another super high hedge fund or something, or super high pressure company, when it's the same problem, same challenge. So I don't think it's like just only startups that suffer from that. So I don't know. I don't think you can say, well, only young people can work in startups, or only old people are successful as founders, or whatever the kind of line is. But I'm sure there is some data behind it that you said, that will pinpoint, who are more successful or less successful. I just don't have a good, heuristic from my personal experience to give a rule of thumb.
Well, that's a very nice, hopeful answer for people listening out there. But
Look, I mean, I feel like I'm sorry to cut across you. I feel like I've been a little bit like, oh, startups are really hard, and don't go there. And they're a lot of fun as well. It's like it's holy, my God, is it a lot of fun? People wouldn't do it otherwise. And
true.
it's very rewarding, and the challenge is amazing, and you pick up and learn an enormous amount, even when it fails, especially when it fails.
Yeah.
So, there's a huge amount, and but I think. Actually, what is the one thing that I can say is uniform amongst all the people that do well in startups? They're really optimistic. Because you have to be optimistic. Now, sometimes that is unfortunately, like, oh, just 6 more months, and just trust me on this, and it'll be fine. So you kind of cling on a little bit too much as well. Sometimes that's the flip side of that. But that's what I'd say. People that I've seen who really enjoy startups are generally very resilient and very optimistic, because they're kind of like, they have to be.
I love it. It's and I think I'm very happy to hear that as well, because I think I've met a lot of people, young, old, all sorts of demographics, that do hold those characteristics, and I often do say to them, "No, I think you should have something of your own." Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, Alastair, you're the founder of Product Tapas. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to. So what's my strap line? I don't know. Well, something like top podcast summarized, best of AI news and tools research in a 5-minute digest. But what it really is like a weekly newsletter that aims to have curate the best of podcasts, the best of news, and the best articles in bite-sized, shareable, snippets. Hence why the Tapas came from. Ironically, the genesis of it was there's too many newsletters and too many podcasts to keep on top of, and I sort of when I first was out of a job, when I finished the co-founding the business, and we didn't get funding, and I was just doing a lot of reading to kind of keep on top of what's going on in products, and I was like, oh, God, this is a bit, where do I go? And then I wanted to learn a bit about GPT, ChatGPT, AI, and so I sort of had this idea that perhaps I could create a newsletter using AI, to summarize stuff and curate it. And I do use quite a bit to summarize the podcasts. I love podcasts. I listen to them when I'm walking the dog, but it takes 45 minutes or half an hour of my time, and that's great. So you can only really listen to so many at any point in time, but you can read an article in about 2 minutes. And so you get a sense, in essence, of what the key points are. And if you're really interested, go off and listen to the detailed podcast. And so managed to curate this list of something like 60 different podcasts now, news sources, articles, and every week I various different tools kind of pull them together into a newsletter and circulate it. And I love it. It's not like I've got. There is a path that I could take it to, if I had all the time in the world to kind of monetize it and do something, but it's not really the point of it. I just enjoy doing pulling it together, and you know what, it turns out to be quite useful because I know what's going on in the product world. And then people seem to really like it, and it's two of the people I met last night were like, oh yeah, you do product stuff, it's great, and it gives me a huge amount of satisfaction. And back to the thing you said, well, lo and behold, it builds my brand, and that wasn't my goal when I started it. It was just, but it's just a very nice unintended consequence, I guess. So as long as I can, I'll keep doing it. It probably takes me about 2 hours a week on a Sunday to kind of pull it together, but I get all the stuff lined up across the week. And so if we've got an hour here, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, adds up to about an hour, in the week. But I enjoy it. And hopefully people enjoy it too.
No, it's wonderful, and I think the fact that you're spending some of your time on Sundays doing it, and I'm sure you spend a lot of time outside of that as well. It just shows that it's something you're passionate about, and I think that's a very important point to make to people as well. Is being a founder isn't necessarily doing something to make money out of it. A lot of the times it is just because you enjoy doing it and you want to put your focus into it. And it's very much like this podcast. It's something I enjoy. It's something that I hope my guests enjoy as well. And that is the most satisfactory thing for me is, I'm doing it for fun. It's getting really great conversations out there. And the people that I do speak to who do listen, they say, that really helped me. That is the best comment that I get of doing this whole thing. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Alastair, you're an incredibly calm person, considering everything that you've been through, and I can clearly see why you've gone through them and taken your learnings and taken everything in your stride. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received, or your own advice which you'd like to give out to the world?
So I guess it's quite hard to think of like one bit of advice. Like I always gravitate towards what gives you energy. We talked about what you like. I think the best piece of advice though is that the lady at manager at Tesco, like she's a force of nature. She now Jessica Frame. She now runs BCG in the UK, so she's a pretty smart person. She once told me, stop caring so much, and you'll be more effective. And I was like, what? Like I kind of like, it was care less and you'll achieve more. And I was kind of like, what do you mean? Like will you tell me to not be as conscientious, not work as hard? And it sort of feels counterintuitive. What the essence of it really was or is, it's about focus. It's about prioritizing. So if you like, you're so passionate about everything, trying to persuade people to do everything, trying to like always fight in the fight. You can't keep a million plates spinning at all times, and sometimes some of them will drop. Sometimes people will just get frustrated that you're always fighting the point. You're not like there's no give and take. Pick the plates that you want to keep spinning. Pick the ones you want to allow drop. It will reduce your overall stress and improve your decision making, and I guess improve your creativity because you've got more time to be creative, and probably even build resilience because you're kind of like you've got to figure out and deal with the challenges that comes when stuff doesn't go to plan, or you're saying no, I can't do that. So like it's a really counterintuitive, deliberately so, I think, counterintuitive, careless, and it's like, well, so it's kind of a good line that stuck with me. And it took me it's quite funny, it took me a while to kind of like come to agree with it, and I think that's possibly sometimes the best sign of good advice, because you either you don't necessarily agree with it first of all, or you're having to work it out, and it's a really good insight. You've gone deep. You've got to kind of make quite a big change to listen to and act on the advice.
I absolutely love it, and I think you're right. I think a lot of us know it, but we don't want to accept it. And it may take some people more time than others to actually get there, but I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And Alastair, thank you so much for being on. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you have too.
Yeah,
and I can't wait for everyone to hear it.
Look, thanks so much. Hopefully some useful advice there, but I've just enjoyed the conversation, so thanks for having me on, Anna.
Absolutely, and here's to part 2.
All right. Okay. Excellent. Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
Good.
Right.